Welcome to Doctors Rating Trends. In this episode, we're going to explain the rapid rise in autism cases over the last 40 years.
Turns out it isn't Tylenol, vaccines, diet, climate change, or even iPhone sitting on mommy's lap.
In the mid-1990s, the definition of autism was dramatically expanded, and at the same time, the government created massive incentives for schools and parents to diagnose their children with the disorder. Welcome to Doctors Rating Trends. This is a show where identical twin doctors do a deep dive into the medical trends of today. One takes the pro, the other takes the con, and we do all the research and pass the findings on to you.
We have discovered the answer to the grand mystery that has confounded scientists for the past 30 years. Why have the cases of autism been rising so rapidly? The recent controversy over Tylenol and vaccines kicked off our interest. We spent the week looking through the latest literature and studying the science around autism.
The grand epiphany didn't really hit until we saw the chart for the increase in childhood autism. We see a gradual rise from the 70s, and there was a noticeable increase in the middle of the 1990s. This was followed by a massive spike in 1999, followed by a steady upward trajectory. So what happened there? This didn't correlate with the historical rates of Tylenol usage.
And while there has been a steady increase in vaccines, it did not match up with the spike and steep rise afterwards.
There are two major events that caused a rapid rise in autism. First, the definition of autism was expanded dramatically in 1994. And the second was the 1997 amendment to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which added the expanded definition of autism to receive government benefits. Although the amendment occurred in 1997, it was implemented in 1999, where we see our spike. Let's dig in a little deeper on the definition of autism and how it has expanded. In college, I did research in a neuroscience lab that studied autism. Back then, autism was considered a truly debilitating disease. Think Dustin Hoffman and Rain Man. Under that understanding of autism, large parts of the brain were not able to interact with the world effectively. There's a famous version of autism called autistic savant, in which the brain would hyperdevelop the parts of the brain that could understand the world, making for extraordinary abilities in math, memory, or art. Otherwise, autistic people were completely dependent on others to survive.
I remember thinking it was odd that despite hearing about this exponential rise in autism, I haven't seen anyone with the old school autism for decades. That is because there was a decision by the American Psychiatric Association to dramatically expand the definition of autism in 1994. The American Psychiatric Association publishes a manual outlining the criteria for mental disorders called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM for short. The fourth edition, published in 1994, expanded the criteria for autism and associated it with pervasive developmental disorders, which included 5 separate categories. The first being autistic disorder. This is the one we classically know as the Rain Man type of autistic with a very narrow criteria. The next one was Asperger's disorder. This involved social interaction impairments and restricted interests, but no clinically significant delays in language or cognitive development. This captures many of the high-functioning individuals who didn't fit classic autism. The third one is pervasive developmental disorders not otherwise specified. This is a catch-all for kids who had some autistic features but didn't meet full criteria for autistic disorder or Asperger's. And this hugely expanded prevalence because clinicians could use it flexibly. The other two, Rett's disorder and childhood disintegrative disorder, were included in this, but then were later removed in 2013. In 2013, the DSM-IV was published. And what that ended up doing was collapsing autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, into the autism spectrum disorder. The criteria organized around 2 domains, one social communication and interaction deficits, and the other restricted and repetitive behaviors. And then it added a level of severity, number 1 being requiring support, number 2 being substantial support, number 3 being very substantial support. And notice that all of the criteria still require some level of support. That means that this guy carries the same diagnosis as this guy. Do we really think that Elon Musk is a disabled person who needs more time on tests and extra tutoring? To give you an idea of how easy it is to diagnose a child with autism, let's take a look at the criteria that clinicians use now. There are two groups of behaviors they look for, and if you have one from the first group and two from the second group, then you're on the spectrum. So here we are looking at group A behaviors, and you only need one of these. Deficits in social emotional reciprocity can mean something as simple as failure to follow a conversation. Deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction can be something as simple as abnormal eye contact and body language. Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships can just be something as simple as difficulty making friends. You only need two of the group B behaviors. So stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, this can be something as simple as lining up toys or flipping objects repeatedly. Insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns or verbal, nonverbal behavior. This can be something as simple as adherence to a routine or distress over changes in a routine. Highly restricted, fixed interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. This can be something like a strong attachment to an object or an interest that seems abnormal. And then hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. This can be something as simple as an overreaction or underreaction to things like light or pain. The examples that I just gave are ones that are outlined in the DSM-5, and they said, while these are illustrative, there are lots of other examples that can fall into these categories. So the question is, can you think of any 5-year-olds that might qualify as autistic? Now imagine you want your child to have extra advantages in school, and if the school wants extra money and resources to teach your child.
So now nearly any kid can be diagnosed with autism. But if that's only half the story, if the DSM-IV dumped gas all over the field of childhood psychology, the government lit the match. It all started with a very well-meaning and necessary piece of legislation called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Autism was recognized as a qualifying condition for the benefits under the Act and the reauthorization of 1990. After the DSM-IV expanded the definition in 1994, the reauthorization of 1997 included them for needing benefits as well as ADHD. Why are these designations important? It's because they strongly incentivize diagnosis of autism. Parents of children with autism can see their kids get extra resources, tutoring, and special consideration for exams. States with more children with these disorders get more federal funding, which is then allocated down to the schools. Almost overnight, massive screening programs for autism sprung up and started catching as many students as possible so that they could get more funding. If that wasn't enough, parents with children with autism and severe ADHD are eligible for supplementary security income. So basically, on every level, the state gives out monetary and service incentives to families, schools, and states to diagnose any child with a disease who may just be presenting as a little bit different.
Now it is normalized to the point that medical literature says that kids with autism may be bright and highly functional, but autistic if they've ever displayed the traits. Not only is this disability being normalized, it's even celebrated in the umbrella of neurodivergent. Young people desperate to get an identity in the victimhood hierarchy even feel social pressure to identify with this sort of disability. Famous successful people like Elon Musk and Anthony Hopkins are said to be on the autism spectrum. There is rampant speculation that Sir Isaac Newton and Einstein were on the spectrum. Should Elon Musk, Sir Isaac Newton, and Einstein be given special one-on-one tutoring and extra time on tests? According to the expanded remit of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the answer is yes. If the world's most successful people are autistic, is it really a disability? Can you really group Elon Musk together with a non-communicative individual uncontrollably rocking back and forth and having a panic attack at any loud noise?
You bring up a really interesting point about the rapidly expanding criteria for mental disorders. I remember sitting through my psychiatry class in medical school, learning about the various DSM diagnoses, thinking, all that sounds like me. If all I had to do was get a diagnosis and then the government would pay me cash, give me extra tutors, an extra 4 hours to take my tests, and pay extra money to my school for teaching me, I'm pretty sure I would have gotten diagnosed too, and the school would have made sure of it.
It was simple to figure out the cause of the dramatic increase in autism cases when you just look at the numbers and ask some common sense questions about incentives. We have seen a gross abuse of programs meant to help people with disabilities. I see this all the time in my practice where people are trying to qualify as disabled to get extra benefits. The system incentivizes this behavior on every level and does nothing to check it. Doctors are increasingly compensated by patient satisfaction scores. On a personal level, if you refuse to diagnose someone as disabled, they will not only become dissatisfied, they can also become combative. I know of cases where patients have pulled guns on doctors who denied giving them a disability diagnosis. Equally corrosive to the system are doctors who just want to be nice and will do it because it helps the patient, but don't think about the consequences for society. We should also examine the psychological consequences of loosely handing out mentally disabled labels to people. What are the long-term consequences on the mental health of healthy individuals who believe they're handicapped?
So, when considering the rise in autism, we aren't definitively saying Tylenol, vaccines, iPhones, climate change, or sun flares aren't having some impact on the developing mind. We just need to get real about the elephants in the room leading to this rise in autism numbers. First, we need to tighten up the definition to only include people who are mentally disabled with autism and re-examine the government incentives to diagnose. Also, with such a broad definition of autism that includes so many normal variants of the human psyche, you can't meaningfully study what's causing it. Once we've narrowed the field to people who are truly disabled with autism, we can start to have a real conversation about the underlying causes.
Remember to like, subscribe, and let us know what you think about this video. We'd love to hear your input.